Welcome to Resilience Development in Action, where strength meets strategy and courage to help you move forward. Each week, your host, Steve Bisson, a therapist with over 2 decades of experience in the first responder community, brings you powerful conversations about resilience, growth, and healing through trauma and grief. Through authentic interviews, expert discussions, and real-world experiences, we dive deep into the heart of human resilience. We explore crucial topics like trauma recovery, grief processing, stress management, and emotional well-being. This is Resilience Development in Action with Steve Bisson.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 214. If you haven't listened to episode 213 yet, that was me talking about my birthday, what it means to me, and all that fun stuff. And don't forget to check out, I'm going to have some extra stuff on the premium podcast. Only $3 a month, really good. Go listen to it. But episode 214 will be with a group that Lisa Knowles, who I will describe who she is very shortly. But Lisa Knowles started about a year ago, of culturally competent therapists in Massachusetts. And I'm very honored to say that they invited me for the third meeting, maybe. So I've been part of the coalition for a short while right now, but we now have a name. It's called Behind the Badge and Beyond. And for me, I want to give all their biographies, but I can't because it's going to be too long and they're going to talk about it anyway. But Richard Winning is someone who got his master's in social work at Westfield State University, currently volunteers on the Alumni Association there. He began responding with police to acute psychiatric crisis in 2017. And from there, he got his part-time work and then this is a full-time job now. And he specializes in police, fire, EMS, and ER staff, which is what we're going to talk about anyway. Alexa Silva is someone I met through a long time ago, not too long ago, about a year ago. And then we kept on staying in contact. She invited me to the coalition. She also is someone who has worked with first responders for a long time. She has EMDR and CISM training. She focuses on individual and couples, and she blends expertise with personal experience due to being married to a firefighter. And with over 5.5 years of sobriety, she offers a live perspective that deeply affects and influences in a good way the first responder military community. She brought her personal journey in, I hope, and can't wait to hear from her. And then there's Jennifer Waldron, who is someone who worked up in Brattleboro, Vermont at the retreat there. I actually remember when I worked in Vermont from the Brattleboro retreat, I had sent some people there, and obviously from Mass too, but I remember my times in Vermont. She worked as a correctional officer and as well as an acute psychiatric hospital. So she served the uniformed personnel. She's dedicated to creating a safe and supportive environment for first responders, uniformed personnel, and be culturally competent, which is so important in this field. And I'm sure we're going to bring that up on the conversation. Lisa Knowles is the founder of, I can't remember what the official name was originally, but now it is the Behind the Badge and Beyond. She's the original founder. She's in Ludlow, Massachusetts with her practice. She started off, she's been doing the work since 2012. Her direct, grounded approach and cultural competency has helped her build trust with her individuals. She also founded the group that we have now. And she wants to unite all clinicians that are culturally competent with first responders to join and work together so that we have all these great resources. Erin Sheridan is someone I also met through the coalition. Super nice. We've exchanged several times since then. She has a solo private practice that works with first responders, veterans. She graduated from Anna Maria College and got her master's also in counseling psych. Been doing this since 2008. She worked for IOP, PHP, intensive outpatient, partial hospitalization. She's the clinical director of her local CISM team, for the last 3 years, and she has extensive training. She's also a spouse and family member of first responders. And finally, but not less, is me, who's going to be talking about all this with everyone. And I hope you enjoy it, and here's the interview. GetFree.ai. You heard me talk about it. I'm going to keep on talking about it because I love it. I've had about 1.5 years, 18 months practice with it, and I still enjoy it. And it saves me time and it saves me energy. Free.ai takes your note, makes a what you're talking with a client, just press record. And it does either transcript, it does a subjective and an objective with a letter if needed for your client and for whoever might need it. So for $99 a month, it saves me so much time that it's worthwhile. And if you do it for a whole year, guess what? You get 10% off. More importantly, this is what you got to remember, because you are my audience that listens to Resilience Development in Action. If you do listen to this and you want to use free.ai, put in the code Steve50 in the promo code area, Steve50, and you will get $50 off in addition to everything we just talked about. Get freed from writing your notes, get freed from even writing your transcripts. Use that to your advantage. Free.ai, a great service. Go to getfree.ai and you will get one of the best services that will save you time and money. And I highly encourage you to do so. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 214. This is a very special episode to me because these are individuals who took me in a few months ago, and we were trying to work on a great project, and we are continuing to create a project that now has a name and everything else, which is Behind the Badge and Beyond. And I really appreciate this group, the group being Lisa Knowles, Richard Winning, Erin Sheridan, Alexa Silva, and Jennifer Waldron. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Recovery Development in Action. You get to see my home studio. I couldn't make it to my work today.
Cool.
Thanks for having us. Hi.
Well, it's funny because this group, honestly, when we get together, we can't shut up. And then we get here and I feel like everyone's so nervous. This is like a conversation, guys. We're dedicated, give a little bit of the group. This, when it was started, was for really Massachusetts and therapists who are seeking to help first responders. And it's become even more organized as we've gone along. We got a little logo and everything now. We have a website, just copyrighted the name. So there's a lot of good stuff going on. But, I know you guys, except for Jen. I haven't met Jen, so I'm going to start with her. How about you introduce yourself, Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen Waldron. I have been a clinician for 10 years now. I work with first responders exclusively and uniform service members. I've included them. I don't really know what specifically to say. I'm surrounded by first responders, married to a first responder. I wore a uniform. I was a corrections officer. I understand the community, and there was no question what community I was going to be working with once I started and once I became a therapist.
Well, I think you said plenty. Where were you a correctional officer, at the MCIs or?
At Franklin County.
Well, I worked in a prison a couple of times, so I didn't serve, I promise. But I guess I did mental health for a couple of years. So I really respect my correctional staff. In fact, they're invited to my group that I have. I think correctional staff have it as first responders because they're pretty much all, I would say all three, because they got to do medical also. So they definitely have those things within what I call a different culture. So we can talk about the CO culture forever. But welcome, Jen.
Thank you.
And Alexa, in the top left corner on my computer. How about you go next?
Okay, great. Yes. Hi, my name is Alexa Silva. I'm also a clinician that specializes in working with the military personnel and first responders. And like Jen, come from a family of first responders. And a big reason why I actually got into this is because of my husband. So being married to a Marine veteran and a firefighter really kind of gave me that open eye of, okay, when we're not doing this right in the field, coming home to it and really seeing the personal level of it. My background is social work, and I thought I was going to go get a PhD. And I did my first master's in social community psych, and I was like, what the hell is this? And I did not want to go do research or do any of that crazy stuff for another 7 years. So then I got another master's in social work, and I really wanted to get into the clinical piece. But I really, again, love the concept of what we do clinically, but also taking what we have at home and being, being from a family of first responders, being a spouse, being a friend, children, right? Anything. And then how we can really relate that. So with that too, I've had a really great experience of working with individuals in this field individually, but also at a couples level. And sometimes that can be hard to navigate. So I know we'll talk more about that, but yeah, just love what I do. I don't have the personal background of doing the job every day, but I do have the family piece. So
Well, welcome, Alexa. And yes, the family stuff. A couple of episodes ago, I had someone talk about the quote. She's from Cindy Doyle from Code 4 for Couples.
Oh,
Uh,
she's great.
she's amazing. And, I had so many messages from family members saying, thank you for addressing this stuff. So it's something that really is needed to be addressed. And, another one who's married to the profession, essentially. So thank you, Alexa. How about we go with
Thank you.
Richard? Just trying to mix it up on my board here.
Yeah, yeah. So my name's Richard Winning. I'm the owner operator of Responders Refuge. For the last 7 years of my life, have worked directly with law enforcement, responding to people experiencing acute psychiatric crisis. I got to about year 6 and really realized that there wasn't a lot of supports for the people, for my colleagues that were doing the work with me. So I decided to start by opening my private practice, and have recently in December went full time into the private practice because there's just so much demand and so much need.
Well, very
Oh, and
happy.
I just hired my first additional employee last week, so
Congratulations.
that's good too.
Yay.
Cultural competence.
That's great.
What cultural competence, Richard?
Yeah. Oh yeah, the she was one of my co-responders. So
Oh,
she
perfect.
she had left that work, and I had told her that as soon as I had enough people lined up on the docket that I would invite her in.
That's awesome. We need more culturally competent people. Hopefully, we'll bring that up too later on because that's why we lose half the people going to therapy. They don't have the cultural
Right.
Yeah.
competency. So I really appreciate that. How about we go? I'll go with Erin because I'll finish off with Lisa because as the one who got us all together, I want to talk to her last. Erin, how about you go next?
Hi, I'm Erin Sheridan. I've been a clinician for 17-ish years. I started off my career actually as an addiction counselor doing drug court down in Connecticut, so I'm licensed down there as well, and then eventually became mental health counselor. I come from family with first responders. I actually wanted to be a canine officer. My bachelor's degree is in criminal justice. Started off like interning with like probation within the whole court system, interned with like police station. So that was kind of like my direction that I wanted to go. Then life took some turns, and here I am counseling. So I've had my practice, Beautifully Unbroken Counseling, since 2021, where I've been majority, there we go, working with first responders and veterans in Sturbridge, Mass. And I also am the clinical director for the Central Mass Critical Incident Stress Management Team, which is near and dear to my heart. And like I said, I came from family with first responders, and then I loved it so much I married into it. So married to a fire lieutenant and public safety diver. So I really wanted to have a relationship that was super healthy within first responders because I've seen it go the opposite way, and that's kind of always been my goal. But yeah, that's what drove me to work with first responders. I absolutely love it. I love the challenges that come with it. I feel like fit in more with like that first responder personality than a lot of like clinicians. So I we laugh a lot at work. There's the dark humor, but there's also times to be serious. Majority of my practice is doing EMDR, and I'm also training a chocolate lab to become a therapy dog. She actually just turned 2 yesterday. So hopefully we'll be starting that process soon.
Well, the promo picture will be you. It says Canine Bella, so it won't be a secret by then. Uh, just want to mention that. But welcome. And last but certainly not least, Lisa Knowles, I want to hear from you because I got this invitation to this group through you. I know Alexa had contacted me, but I really appreciate it. And, I know the important work you do, but please
The
share.
OG.
She is the OG. She is the
Oh
OG.
my goodness. Well, thank you so much. I have to mirror what Erin said. I absolutely love doing this work and working with this population. And the passion and the drive started in 2012 when a uniformed officer in crisis showed up at my little office in the back of a building. And, my initial reaction was, oh shit, what did I do? But quickly it shifted to, compassion and connection with him. And I realized he wasn't there for me, and I needed to be there for him. And his vulnerability really opened my eyes to how few safe and judgment-free spaces exist for first responders, and especially police officers. And his journey alone showed me what's possible when trust and consistency are present. It revealed this massive unmet need. I started getting word of mouth referrals all hours of the night. It just showed how starved the community was for culturally competent care. And that really pushed me and pushed my skills, wanting to learn more. And I saw this systemic gap, and I felt like, I really need to fill this, and not just with therapy, but with understanding and advocacy. And then when I started doing all this, I really felt like I was on an island by myself, but I knew that there were others out there like me, and I desperately wanted connection. So I started researching and trying to find folks. And I think Erin was the very first person that I found, and she's been amazing and helpful throughout this journey and connected me to other people and all of you that are here, and then our newer members. So I feel, really excited about what's in the future for us all. And so I'm really just glad to be here, and for all of you.
Well, thanks to you, there's episode 214 now on resilience development in action. So thank you for that. And do we call Erin the second OG? What do we call her?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, second OG.
I was just excited to make a friend.
Me too.
Making friends as an adult is hard.
It is.
The other thing that's fantastic is we've been going on for about 10 minutes and no one's sworn. There's no swearing yet. That's really shocking to me, actually. I'll be perfectly honest.
Well, I said, oh, shit. I said, oh, shit.
Well, yeah, there's no bleeping on my podcast. I don't bleep anyone. Authenticity is what counts, and hell, we wouldn't be doing this job if we weren't authentic. That's just my view. There's a couple of things that came up that I really want to mention is that, to me, having worked in the correctional facilities, working at the drug courts, parole, probation, working with the police, pulling with fire, to me, they're all in the same kind of category. And what I describe them as is the high functioning, most dysfunctional people you know. They're all high functioning, but they have all shit that goes down. And not all of them. I don't want any emails. Not all of us are fucked up. And I'm okay, I get it. But the point is that that's what really, to me, what's fascinating to me is that's my jam. I worked in community settings and hard places, and that was fun for a while. But I wanted to work with a different population. This is something I embraced since 2000, and I don't regret one single second yet. Maybe sometimes. But you know what? I that's a little bit of how I started. And I was never intended to work. I'm a child and family specialist. I was never intended to work with first responders. No family, no friends. Well, I have many friends now, but I just decided that this was my people. This is just how I decided. But Richard, I know that I'm curious to know how you decided, oh, gee, Willikers, this is great. I'm going to put myself in a car with cops who go on calls, and then I'll end up doing therapy with them in the car. So how did that come about? And why is it your population?
So I have worked with aggressive populations almost my entire career. I started years ago in residential care with violent teens for an organization called Hillcrest Educational Centers, which really, in my mind, was this place where, like, it was the last court of appeals. If kids failed out of that, they just went to jail. There was no gray area with that. I really enjoyed working with that population. And then every step of my career following that was always with those really hard to manage populations. And so BHN, which I worked at the time for the crisis team, was starting a co-responder program. And they pulled me in and were basically like, this is a population you historically work with. Would you like to be one of our first guys to start doing this? And I started in Holyoke Police Department, literally the most dangerous city in the state of Massachusetts, and was there for 4 years. did every type of call from like active shootings to suicides. And yeah, I realized very early in, about 2.5 years in, that guys were coming to me with their problems just because I was there. They knew me. They could trust me to hold what they needed me to hold. That was not my job though. And so I immediately like started researching how do you start a private practice? How do you do those things like insurance, all the liability pieces? And that was where that went to. Was I took about 2 years for me to get comfortable to the point where I knew everything was in place, and then I started taking guys in.
And all I can think of is when you said Holyoke's the most dangerous city in Massachusetts, Brockton and Lawrence says thank you.
Yeah.
That's all I can think of. Sorry, guys. I work with some of these
Although
guys too.
I will say that I don't actually consider Holyoke the most dangerous city in Massachusetts because what they use to do that metric is they include overdoses as a dangerous event. And so like that really skews the numbers for Holyoke's. The actual like number of like violent offenses is not as high as that would suggest. I just want to tip my hat to the officers that work out there, do a great job.
No, they also fudge the numbers in richer towns and they forget about those overdoses. But anyway, I'm not going to start talking about my problem with that. How about you, Lisa? I mean, you're the OG. You told us a little bit about it, but when did you say, gee, Willikers, these are my people? Because, I've heard other therapists who work, they have an officer or someone come to them and they go, oh, I'll run for the hills instead of doing this. So how did you decide, gee, this is really interesting. This is what I want to continue doing for the next 10, 15, open a business, start a group. What made you decide all that?
Well, I think that it was with that first officer that showed up at my door. I felt like I found my people. I wasn't raised in a first responder family, although I have a lot of military in my family and was married to a military officer. But the ability to have a kind of directive approach and also, letting the F-bomb fly was really, I felt like I was at home. And yeah, I just felt like it was just a great fit from the beginning. And, that is what pushed me to want to learn as much as possible about the field. And as I look back across my career, there were incidents along the way that always put me in contact with law enforcement. I was one of the first students from our town of Ludlow, their Citizens Police Academy. I participated in that. I was a social work kind of intern at our local council on aging, and they put a substation in there. And just all of a sudden, guys were coming into my office and offloading. And I mean, I was in my 20s. So it was just like all of these threads throughout my career that put me in contact with law enforcement. And then when I went to work at BHN, as Richard had also worked there, I worked in the training department developing trainings, and they asked me, hey, since you have a private practice working with police, would you be interested in doing some trainings for the CIT? And I said, sure. And then every few months, I was part of, delivering trainings to the CIT, and most specifically, one of the first wellness trainings in CIT specifically for officers.
Yeah, and I think the wellness stuff is so important. We really need to keep on working on doing these in service for officers and firefighters, and frankly, again, going back to the correctional staff and everything else. So I really believe in that. Well, Jen, I would love to hear, what did you decide? Like, oh, geez, these are my people, because I think everyone has their story.
Well, I think when I was working at the Uniformed Services Program at the Bradwell Retreat, and I was working as a mental health worker, just entry level work, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed working with them. My brother's a police officer. My husband worked for the sheriff's department. My son now is a police officer and a firefighter. So I have a lot of family, but being in the uniform services program and seeing people come in and really do well and then leave and kind of fall off and have to come back. There's a lot of, coming back, and everything was great when I was here and I didn't really know how to hold it together once I was gone. For me, it drove me to go back to school. It drove me to go back and get my master's. I got my master's, went back to the uniform services program as a therapist, and again, realized I'm better needed in the community, not in this program, but so that when people leave, that they have a place and someone to help continue the work that got done while, that kind of work. And there's a lot of really good programs that people go to and then don't know what to do when they leave.
And I think that, I shout out to the Brattleboro retreat when it was around. It was one of my favorite places to send people. And I lived in Morrisville, Vermont for about a year. And I went down there a couple of times during that time to do some trainings and stuff like that. So I really shout out to the Brattleboro retreat. Thank you for doing what you do. Is your family still around here or Vermont, or where are they?
Oh, I'm in Gill, Massachusetts. So we're kind of on the border of 3 states. And my family works in and around this area. My husband's retired now, so.
Well, I'm going to go to Erin and hear a little more about why you decided, besides watching your family go through it. I mean, what made you decide that, geez, this is a good career choice? I do it at home. Might as well do it in for my living.
Right? I think it was a few things, like looking back, like within working with drug court. I mean, some of the folks I worked with, like, I can see the police perspective too, of like, here's the really frustrating people out there that, like, you see them over and over again. They just keep, reoffending, using drugs. They're not getting it. So like I kind of saw like some of the burnout with them, and I picked up on it, and that was like a huge factor eventually for me to go into private practice. But I remember from back in the days when I worked in agencies, I had a couple of clients that were medics, and I would get them on my caseload. And back in those days, like, you didn't do your own intakes, like you were just assigned clients randomly. And I would actually get in arguments with psychiatrists because they were determined that they were narcissistic because they used dark humor to cope with all of the things they saw. And they're like, well, these guys obviously just don't care about, seeing dead kids, because they all had like the black clouds around them. And the biggest thing is nobody ever asked them what they did for work. They didn't really take that into account. So I would hear it and I was like, oh, well, that completely makes sense why you're using like the dark humor just for coping. And you're like, this is trauma. Like, this is complex trauma. You see it every single day. You're not showing up on people's best days. Like, if you've got like 15 calls in a 24-hour shift, that's 15 different traumas that you're being witness to. So after seeing them, and I got it just because I've been around it, that was kind of the direction I started going in. At the time I worked out in Northeastern Connecticut, and there really wasn't anything out that way for first responders. There's like a few more programs now, but like really, really new. Even most of Connecticut for like critical incident stress, it's not what it is here in Massachusetts. I like to think Massachusetts has it together with like critical incident stress and just helping. So because I think there's more resources here and I lived in Massachusetts, it seemed natural that my practice was in Mass. And, especially knowing so many people, because the first responder world is very, very small, it becomes like word of mouth. And then it's like, oh yeah, I can trust this person. So then it's just word of mouth. And that's where it kind of goes from there. And I think my approach, where I started working more with, drug court, which they're also fine and don't have a problem. It was like a really easy transition to you work with first responders who are also fine and don't have a problem and, don't like to use the other F word, feelings. So instead we just use the word stress reactions. It's a lot easier. And then it just kind of became natural, especially said with my background working within the court system, and that just seemed like a natural direction to go in.
Well, the drug courts are something that's really close and dear to me. I started 2 in Massachusetts, and they're so important to be had. And yes, how many times did the court officer or probation officer pull me aside and tell me stuff, never mind the officers. That's why, like, I know I'm talking about law enforcement in general. Is it different from police to probation? 100%. Not trying that's apples and oranges, but law enforcement officers and firefighters and military compared to the general population, apples and celery, if you ask me.
Absolutely. And I mean, like even probation officers, like they're just as hard. And especially me going in as a clinician, nobody wants to talk to me because I'm a clinician. So my thing was I always bake and bring baked goods. People start talking to you when you bring baked goods. And now having a really cute chocolate lab, they warm up right away. But to this day, I still bring baked goods when I go to different departments, whether it be like debriefs or just even trying to go around and introduce myself. I think it makes a huge difference too. If you could put like a name with a face, not just, oh, here's a clinician, and they run in the opposite direction. I don't even usually really introduce myself as a clinician unless I actually have to.
We have a meeting on July 25th, just saying. And we all like baked goods here. Just saying. Alexa.
See what I can do.
Oh, we're counting on it. You know, there's so many things I could continue going on. This is what's great about having such a large group. But Alexa, I'd love to hear from you. What, besides going, gee willikers, I'm married to it, might as well get into it. What this made you decide to work with this population? Because this is not a population that everyone wants to work with.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. And it's kind of similar to what Lisa had said. I feel like I kind of always stumbled into it. So, when you're getting into this field, sometimes you're kind of all over the place, right? So I've worked with kids, like elderly in school, but every single time I always would come across military personnel or first responders, and I just kept being connected to it. And I'll never forget, I think I was working for an elder agency out near Boston. And whenever I was doing the visits, I would have not only just the stigma, right, of the older population and like the family forgets about them, right, but that piece of the veteran stuff, right, and then like the PTSD and the alcohol use, and they were being forgotten about. And it was just having a conversation, sitting with them, right, because again, I think that became second tiered, right, because then oh, my family's older, right, like, oh, we need to forget about them. And they're like, this is my identity, right? I'm still struggling. And with that generation, right, the stigma is you didn't go get help, right? So we have to forget about it, right? Stuff it down. So I think sometimes when we look at this, we really are like, okay, what about the younger people, right? But it's also over like 70, 80 years old. I'll never forget when I was at the VA, I had a Vietnam vet and police officer come in, and he was 70 years old, and he had walked around with all of this trauma, and he had such a hard time letting go of that identity, and it broke him. But I'm like, you got through the door, right? It's the first step. I don't care how old you are. And then the other piece that really hit me was when I did some work at Tewksbury State Hospital on the medical unit and substance use unit. Briefly, I was in and out besides like the lockdown unit, but there was this one veteran who just will always stick with me. And the stigma that he had was just like, you're in here, right? You're just another person, and he had such a strong identity to the military, right? And like, he had a really hard time connecting until we just sat down and talked about it, right? So one of those things is just building rapport with people, because again, right, they have this identity and sometimes they're then forgotten about, right? It's like, you're just a job and then you're just a person, but sometimes that is their whole identity and they've never even started to pull back a layer. So that was such a big piece, is working with these populations. I kept getting drawn back to it, right? Even if it was working with families or kids, I could see, when the family was like first responders and military, it would just have such a different effect, right? It would affect the family differently. It would affect the parents. And there was just a lot of pull back and forth, right? Like just a lot of things that I feel like whoever we were working with couldn't touch it. And I think Erin hit upon it perfectly, right? Like that cultural competency piece, right? Like we're drawn to this field. We can kind of like see it from a mile away, right? And no one else wants to. Well, sometimes people are like, we really want to go into this field, right? This is great, but then they don't know what they're getting into, right? And then they end up crying, and then the first responders holding their hand. And that's not what we came for, right? So it's just really knowing that you have to be here for these people. And I think we all have a passion for that, and then this was something else that my husband and I would talk about, because similar with Erin, my husband's also a fire lieutenant, and we would see it even early on, right? Like in the 20s, 30s and 40s, right? And no matter what stage you're in, like there is such an effect. So I think, again, there's not enough people in the community. It goes back to, I forget who said it, but I think maybe it was Erin or Lisa, but a lot of these veterans that I work with who are a lot older, they didn't even know where to go. Right. It's just like, here's something broad, right? Unless you're already in the VA sector, you're not going to know. So again, it's just until you actually meet someone, or like we kind of have to really dig through these resources, and like culturally competent clinicians are not always known. So it's hard.
I agree wholeheartedly. And the cultural competency piece is what I felt was missing with a whole lot of people. The day that a first responder told me the story of going to talk to someone who is a trauma specialist and said a story so dark that the therapist says, I need a few minutes before I can respond to you. And yeah, like that, yeah, like, you can't handle my shit and I'm supposed to talk to you about stuff. So I think that that's what, when you talk about cultural competency is so essential because you got to be able to sit there and take it, so to speak. Number one.
Mhm.
Number two, we put in the vetting process for our group, dark humor. People don't understand that dark humor is essential for survival. They think that we're just being assholes. And I know that, when people do that in my sessions, I laugh with them. And I know that my colleagues who are not working in this field look at me with like dread when I do that. And they're
They
like,
don't get it.
what the
They
hell's
don't.
wrong with you? And I'm like,
They don't get it.
but to me, it's stupid that they don't get it because don't we learn in school to match the client where they're at? But anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Let me not bitch too much. But one of the
Steve,
things.
you're totally right too with like the clinicians that don't get it. Like I've heard from clients, like police officers that come in, they try to outreach for therapy and the clinician will not work with them because they don't support the police,
Mhm.
which is appalling. Absolutely appalling. Like you don't put your own anything into the session or they cry.
Right.
Ugh.
It's
I've heard
we need
that
culturally
story.
competent.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or even missing the fact of when they say I'm fine, right? That's such a big thing, right? Fine is fucked up, isolated, neurotic, and exhausted.
Right, or get frustrated with like the doorknob, like, hey, it's
Mhm.
5 minutes before a session,
Yeah.
and then they don't understand what they do. It's like, no, that's what they do. Like
Right.
Mhm.
what they do.
Well, you're talking about a lot of the challenges because for me, the doorknob therapy, if my guys know if they ever pull that shit, I'm like, come back in. I go to the waiting room. Like, you're going to wait 10 minutes. And I'm like, you're not getting away with this crap. So they don't do doorknob therapy with me. I just put that. And then people are like, well, you made someone wait. Well, you know what? A, they know how I work. And B, they're probably first responders. And one of the guys one day, swear to God, came in when I waited for 10 minutes. He's like, oh, that guy tried to walk away by saying stupid shit. And I'm like, yep, that's exactly what happened.
Yep.
So they know
Well,
each
they all
other.
know each other anyways.
Yeah.
So like, they're fine with it.
But I think that might be important, Erin. Maybe you started talking the conversation. I'd love to hear more about the difficulties and challenges because this is not for everyone. This is not for everyone. And I'm not shitting on any therapist for real, but this is not for everyone.
I mean, I think like some of the challenges that it's so much rapport building, and I think for the clients to like get to know us too, because like they're sizing us up. Like they totally are the moment they come in. Like the police have like, like their stance with like, here's my arms over my chest, I'm gripping my vest. They've all
That's the
exactly.
closed one, and this is the open one.
Yeah, the I'm fine. And I think like I said it is building rapport. And I think one of my favorite moments in sessions is when, like the clients like sitting there and like their posture's all rigid and like they're clearly anxious and they're apprehensive, but then they sit back and they relax. And then and it's usually it takes like a couple of dark jokes to like really like bring that like to the forefront. And it's beautiful because then they start making like those connections with you. And I really think you have to get to know clients too at like that human level, like absolutely like maintain the boundaries, but you still have to get to know them as a human. They don't want to talk to a robot. They don't want to like sit there like, well, I can't tell you anything about myself because boundaries. They don't want that. Like, if they're coming in and talking to you about all of this stuff, you still need to like be able to disclose a few things within reason, right? And just be a person. That's the biggest thing. They absolutely don't want to hear, well, how does that make you feel? Or oh, what I hear you telling me is blah 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 blah. No, like there's ways to rephrase stuff and talk like a human, opposed to just being like the quote unquote like therapist. So I really kind of strive to be that type of person, and then it's not as challenging. I think for me, honestly, like the biggest challenge is to not fit so many EMDR sessions in like the same day. And I do it to myself like all the time and tell myself I'm not going to do that. And then just keep it up with all the paperwork. But I love that difficult population, or, quote unquote difficult population. I just kind of like breaking through some of that resistance because I don't want to give up on them. They need to be able to feel comfortable and open up.
Erin, also, you just have a great way of, I feel like whenever we're talking professionally and just personally, the power dynamic. I've since day one I've met you, you never make anyone feel like they're in the other seat, right? Because that's so common when first responders come in, right? Because they're already in the power seat. And then, whether, right, even if it's court mandated, whatever that looks like, or they're being fort, right? We have a lot of the chiefs sometimes, you need to get treatment or blah, blah, blah. And they come in and it's like, okay, well, this is just another doctor, psychiatrist or whatever. But just the way that, right. But maybe it's also baked goods. I don't know.
Well, that's too, but also too, sometimes like when I open my mouth, I feel like sometimes they don't realize that they're talking to a therapist. Like, did she really just say that? Because I will call people out on their shit. My favorite line is, how's that working for you?
Yeah.
If I have to dig over and over, well, what brings you in? I'm getting like these vague answers, and I'm like, what are you doing? Or sometimes just even knowing the lingo is such a huge thing.
What's a call?
What's that?
I've had a police officer tell me they went to a therapist and say, I went to a call and, oh, who called you?
That's funny. Or just like I said, knowing the difference between dead and dead, like that's huge. Like I've caught people off guard because I knew what that difference was. Or they come in and they're, like they went to an accident. They're like, oh, I have some cool pictures. I'm like, oh yeah,
Show
like
me.
yeah, you want to see? I'm like, absolutely, like bring them out. So like that, it doesn't really bother me. I've always just found, like, I don't know, just curiosity. I found it interesting and was originally kind of what I wanted to do. So like that kind of stuff doesn't get me.
Is this why is this why we're all friends and we can't function in society?
Probably. I mean, I think like too, one of the other challenges with it is, I think for these guys, it's not so much even like the gruesome stuff. It's more the emotions that come along with like live people. And I think that like their grief, and I think they just don't know what to do with that. And I mean, as therapists, we don't always know what to do with it, but they're seeing it like it's in the forefront in the moment. And I think the important thing, like they like can't wrap their heads around it. They're just like deer in the headlights with it. Like, you just got to let them have their feelings. There's nothing you're going to do or say in that moment to really make them feel better, as long as you're doing everything you need to do and focus on the practical stuff.
And sometimes it's knowing to build the relationship. Sorry, Richard, because I have people who I kept for a year and a half to 2 years. We talked about hockey, the weather, everything but therapy. And then one day it's the trauma dump. And I was ready for it. But, and he's like, wow, you're really patient with me. I'm like, listen, man, I know how this shit works. You don't want to talk about it. I'm not going to sit here and say, please talk about it, because you're not going to talk about it. So I think that what I explain to people is that you need to, like, knowing the challenge is be patient. Some people will tell you right away, and that's great. I think as a male with another male, sometimes I'm not trying to be sexist, but the truth is males will be a little more resistant and want to protect themselves because they want to know, like, if I'm vulnerable, is he going to make fun of me? Is he going to fuck with me? I show them now I will fuck with them, but not for the important stuff. And that's kind of a very tricky thing that therapists don't always understand, because you got to be able to laugh about stuff too.
Right. You have to like just roll with the resistance. And, even when I supervise other clinicians, it's like being patient. You have like, I mean, sometimes like like I tell them, it's like, you got to wait it out, build the rapport. Like you're going to be going back and forth like for a long time, but like you got to build that trust. That's how you roll with the resistance.
There's a big part to this where something that we've all talked about, where, and especially having done it myself, where like you don't realize that you're doing it when you're a first responder, where you engage in emotional numbing to protect yourself from the damages you're being exposed to on a day-to-day basis. And I didn't think that was where most of my like therapy work was really going to focus, like when I started down this pathway. But so much of it is just helping guys reconnect with that emotions and learning how to build those good barriers between like home life and work life, and being able to like reconnect with their loved ones in a meaningful way where they actually feel joy once again is just such a rewarding aspect of this work. Where it's like they don't realize that they're not feeling those emotions anymore. They don't even get it until they finally like have that, like you just said, that epiphany moment, that trauma dump moment where like all of a sudden they're done with that and they're like, that's a real emotion. I haven't had one of those in ages.
Yeah, and I think that the other part too is when you think about that, those emotions is that you learn that what's socially acceptable, anger and
Yeah.
happy. Sadness
Mm-hmm.
ain't acceptable. Surprise definitely isn't acceptable. And fear, if you show fear, you are fucked. And I
Yep.
think I think it's important to realize that those core emotions, getting them to embrace them in their personal life when they don't show it up in their work life. And I always tell them, I'm like, you don't want to show it at work. I'll respect that. I have no problem with that.
Yep.
But you need to be able to live them somewhere. And that's really something that's kind of important because while I'm not opposed to having an officer having a hard day or whatever of any kind or a firefighter, but sometimes being in the moment, showing that emotion, it's just like me crying in session while someone's talking to me, it'd be a little inappropriate. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something
Well, and
that's
I think that they are feeling the emotions. They're just ignoring them. And I always hear, well, I just don't want to feel. I just want to be numb. But I'm like, but really, how is that working? Because you're feeling that.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it just be easier to just maybe focus on them for just like a little bit, and then you don't have to feel them as strong?
the proverbial 10 pounds of shit in a 5 pound bag, if you ask me.
Hmm.
But Jen and Lisa, I mean, what are your challenges? What do you face with those guys that maybe is a little different than the regular population, or uh, as they like to call us, civilians?
Probably one of the biggest things is their grief being misread as anger, apathy, and burnout. I've had folks come in and just be so exasperated by everyone telling them, you're always angry, you're always this, you must be burnt out, you must be this. And, you know, it all comes back to oftentimes that their grief isn't about the loss of a person, it's about the loss of control, identity, innocence, purpose, safety, all of those kinds of things. So I've noticed a lot around grief and being really misunderstood.
And grief is such a complex thing, with all due respect to Kubler-Ross's model, which is a
Yeah.
great start off. It doesn't explain all of it for sure. And again, respect to Elizabeth, rest your soul, but I think there's a lot more to grief than just 5 stages and having an end goal, if you ask me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But Jen, what about you? I want to hear more about your difficulties that you face.
I think one of the hardest things to when I work with people is that the idea that you have to embrace the shit to be able to feel the positive. Like they go hand in hand. You have to be able to walk through the pile of manure to find the daisy on the other side of the manure. You have to kind of be in your stuff. And that's not fun. And it doesn't always feel good. I describe people as like that water dragon that runs across the top of the water. And if you're going through life like that, sometimes you have to sit and kind of, you know, tread water, sit in it, be in it, and feel everything, all the yucky stuff, so that you can have all of the amazing things. I think that training helps. They put their uniforms on, their training kicks in, and they go and they do what they have to do. And they are a bit numb to it, but it's still stuck there. And when they take their uniforms off, you still have to sift through it and put it somewhere. Compartmentalize is something that, we all work to unfurl. But I really think the hardest thing is people don't want to deal with the yucky stuff. They don't want to burden other people. They don't want to burden us. They don't want to burden their family members. So they kind of hold it inside, and realizing that once you start letting some of that out and let some of that go and sit in the muck and the mire, that there is positivity on the other side of it.
Don't tell them positivity. They're just going to run away.
Jen, you hit such a good point with that, and I just want to touch upon the family aspect of that for a sec about, right, they're carrying so much of the weight on themselves, right? And then sometimes spouses or family members will be like, I'm so mad, right? My first responder, my military person, spouse, whatever, doesn't share, right? And then they tell us, well, I'm actually trying to protect them from it, right? They're just carrying all that weight, right? It's not
Yeah.
about anger, like disconnect. Sometimes it's just they're also trying to protect, right? But then who's going to protect them? Right. And
And I
sometimes,
think we've had every single one of us has had someone say to them, I don't really want to share this with you because
Mhm.
I don't like talking about it and I don't want to put it on you as well.
Yeah.
So there
We're
is
like,
that.
put it on us. This is what we're here
Right.
for, right? And no
Yeah.
one has ever
Yeah.
been able to do that for them sometimes.
Right. But the other thing too is like for spouses, like Alexa, I don't know about you, and the same thing with Jen is that, we hear that they went to something, we have no idea what it is. We have amazing imaginations. Like,
Yes.
I mean, I go
Mhm.
straight to like, like something like crazy cinematic, like Chicago Fire.
Yeah.
Like
And
that's what I think is going on with blood spurting out
yeah.
everywhere.
Or brain splatter on the wall. I can't.
Right.
Or
Right.
we
Amazing imaginations.
Yeah, or we know, right, when it's this is something else to talk about terminology and just as a spouse, but even in the clinical field, right? Like if it's a child, rescue or recovery, right? Sometimes immediately, right? All these different things. And but even I think sometimes as a spouse or a family member or a friend, sometimes our clinical brain gets put on the backside, right? Sometimes I always say like when after I'm done work, sometimes I become the client because there's moments and days where I'm like, this is hard, right? Or like we get back into being like a family member, a spouse, or friend too. Like I'm really worried.
Right. And I think that we can put our training aside. I mean, like I said, I'm a child and family specialist. Pretty sure my daughters would have a field day on this podcast talking about how crappy of a dad I am. I know I do good overall, but there's things in life you just forget about your training, you just become a human. Which reminds me that we got to be human here and I got to be precious about the time for everyone. Obviously, we got through 2 questions out of the 12 that I received. So this is typically what this group does is we're good at talking, we share well, come back and even at one point I'd love to have individual interviews with you guys because that would be great. Give us more time and in depth for everyone's story. But we'll look in the beginning of the fall. I know we're going to see each other in a couple of weeks, but I want to thank you all for your time and I appreciate it. And hopefully we'll talk soon. And to everyone who's listening, episode 215 will be out in about a week and go listen to that. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having us. And
Thank you
for
so
this.
much.
Thank you for this group too. Love you all.
Good to see everybody.
Appreciate you.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.